Hello class. Today I'm going to be presenting Diverse BookFinder. Now let's start by going over what it is. Well, Diverse BookFinder is a tool made by researchers who are trying to understand and communicate how children's picture books represent different cultural groups. Now let's start by going over the goals behind this. So some of the goals behind these researchers creating this organization is they want to gather a large, unbiased collection of books featuring a diverse set of characters. And they're focusing on, like I said before, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Now, they've actually developed the largest collection of such picture books in the world, and they lend them out to anyone in the United States through their website. They also are trying to understand and show how different libraries and schools are representing these communities in their own collections. And they do this via a tool that they also provide on their website. Now, let's look over just what they're making available. So the first thing that they have is their circulating collection. Like I mentioned before, it's the largest in the country, and it's a very, very valuable resource to these children who are used to not being represented, even in the books that they read when they are children. The second thing they offer is that they actually make this entire collection searchable as a database, which again makes it easier to use, especially for parents of said children who may not have the technology background to dig into these things themselves without this convenience. The third tool that Diverse BookFinder makes available is their collection analysis tool. What this is a form that any library or school can fill out in which they can submit the titles of picture books that they have available in their own personal collection, and they can receive a breakdown on how different cultural groups are represented in their own personal collection. And the way they do this is by comparing the books present in the personal collection to the books that they have already encountered in their own circulating collection. And this is made possible because their circulating collection is so big that any book they find that's in the personal collections is very, very likely to also be present in the circulating collection. And they're also actively expanding this circulating collection at all times. Now that we've gone over what Diverse BookFinder is, let's go over how it uses technology. Now, obviously, the collection analysis tool, they have to use technology to do this because there's just no other way to gather the information. Obviously, the schools and the libraries can use the website as the endpoint that lets them request the identification that they need, while the data itself is accumulated using computers. They also have the search tool. Now, as I said before, this allows for the instant search of the entire thousands of picture book collection. And that was never possible for these communities, right? Because first of all, no one could collect all these books. And if they did collect them, it was just like in their garage or attic, not in a searchable database that allows them to actually lend these books out. Now, let's go over the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the highlights, the pitfalls, and my personal opinion. Now, some of the pitfalls. Obviously, this is very subject to the personal bias of the actual researchers, because they are, at the end of the day, the ones who are determining how people of color are represented in each individual book. Another pitfall is that the collection itself is limited to featuring only Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which is not the most representative of the general population. And I say this as someone of color who does not usually come up in the conversation, being Indian from the Asian subcontinent, not Indigenous. Now, highlights. It's very, very good that they make a point to collect all the books without bias, and they even make a point of saying on their website that them having a book and making it available to lend is not an indication that they believe that it is a quote unquote good book, even if it does represent people of color, right? It's very, very important because it allows them to give a detailed analysis of important trends in how people of color are being represented, because they have a collection that uniquely can compare books representing people of color to other books representing people of color, because their collection is unbiased. Now let's go over my opinion. Like I said, I think that their collection being so unbiased is very reassuring. And I also believe that the critical analysis of children's media is really important because we all grow up reading it. We all grow up encountering it in some way, shape, or form. And it inevitably seeps into parts of who we are. Now, finally, let's go over some questions. Now, I think these are important questions, so you should consider them at length. The first one is, do you think children's media needs to be analyzed critically? Now, I know it's a popular view to maybe just treat these things like they don't need to be thought about. And to be fair, they really don't need to be thought about to be enjoyed. But if they want to be understood, and I think it's important to understand things that have an incredible impact on our lives, then they do need to be analyzed critically. So I do think it's really important that this research is being done, but it'd be really good to consider that for yourself. Now, does the possible bias of the research team worry you? Now, maybe it doesn't, maybe you trust experts, but it should always be a concern for human bias because it's intrinsic to who we are and we all deal with it. Now, the third question, what troubling representations do you think that this analysis could reveal? Now, obviously, let's address the elephant in the room. These representations are very important because traditionally people of color and black people and indigenous peoples have been tragically represented in children's media through racist stereotypes. And I'd like you to consider maybe what types of stereotypes you think a detailed critical analysis of children's media would reveal. Thank you. Now, if you want my sources, you can look at the computer screen to the bottom right, and I hope you all have a very nice night.